All right, so we'll get started here. The title of this session is Transition the Transition, How Our Eighth Grade Defenses of Learning Need to Change. And that's brought to you by Dr. Jennifer Cox, Susan Dougal, and Adam Watson, all from Shelby County Schools. So excited to see this. I know there's a lot of great work that has happened for a pretty long time now in Shelby County. You guys have been doing this type of work for quite some time, and I'm sure you've got a lot of lessons for us to learn. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Well, thank you. That great introduction, because this is about lessons learned, and we are continuing to learn lessons through our work and through the work of others. One of the most important things that I've figured out as a leader here in Shelby County and in Kentucky is the importance of networking. And days like today, I think, are really important to learn from one another and grow. So I'm just going to start with a little introduction. I am Susan Dougal, Chief Academic Officer in Shelby County. And one of the things I just want to touch base on is just where we are in our journey. So we have, in the last 10 years, been on a journey to more personalized learning and now competency-based education. We have been one-to-one with our devices since September of 2016 for kindergarten through seniors. We developed our profile of a graduate, which you see on the screen there, in 2017. And it has taken the last 3 to 4 years to really make that profile come alive in our classrooms. We did a lot of work where we let teachers and students experiment with it and see where it took them. And now we've developed some systems and structures, some of which we'll talk about today, that have become more intentional in the teaching and measurement of those competencies in our kids. We credit that work to in our strategic leadership plans. We write those every 4 years, and they are very specific and living. We refer to them daily, the actions of those plans. So we're in the 4th year of the plan you see here, and are currently working on the next plan. And one of the reasons we're here today is someone read an article about the work we're doing with the Kentucky Local Laboratories of Learning, where we are one of 7 districts in the first cohort, working on prototyping for advancing Kentucky education and assessment with a new accountability and assessment system. So I'm going to hand this over to Jennifer Cox, who's going to talk to you a little bit about our defenses of learning that we're using now, and what she's learned and how we're moving forward.
Thank you, Ms. Dougal. My name is Jennifer Cox, and I am currently the principal at Shelby County East Middle School. But I have been a classroom teacher and an instructional coach in Shelby County. I've been in that work since 2009. The most interesting perspective that I have, I think, is just having been in this journey at every layer of the implementation. So starting with learning how to have deeper critical thinkers in the classroom. I was part of that work when we began 10 years ago, and then being able to teach through that, and then being able to coach teachers in the work of moving towards a more personalized system of instruction, teaching, and learning. And now leading that work as we try to innovate and become even better at competency-based learning in our district. So I'll kind of toggle back and forth. First, I want to talk about 2 of the things that you will see throughout Shelby County. If you were to walk into any building, you would see these things happening. These are the things that have scaled in our work. First is our defensive learning. And a defensive learning is beyond just the one and done science fair kind of thing. It's beyond a presentation of just a one-time project for students. A defense of learning is a presentation where students have to defend an entire body of work that is pointed to an agreed upon set of learner outcomes. The learner outcomes that we have in Shelby County and that many other districts have around the state is our profile of a graduate. So our students defend learning with a body of evidence of work that they have chosen, sometimes over the years, and they use this body of work to defend their readiness for the next step. We have across our district students doing of learning in grades 5, 8, and 12. But you can find preparation through our exhibitions of learning every grade level from K through 12, preparing for their defense at those transition levels. What else you will see is advisory across the district. This is a dedicated time embedded in our school days where we build purpose and belonging, safety, and relationships. These are built during that time between a student and a trusted adult. These are two ingredients that you will see that are consistent in our journey through to more personalized learning. So some of the things that we have learned at Shelby East Middle in order to be able to make these things happen is, first of all, realizing that time does not dictate students' learning. We want to make sure that we are building systems that allow students to continue to learn beyond the bells of the classroom. We want to make sure that teachers are empowered to do some rearranging of their schedules to suit the needs of the learning. So perfect, for instance, I had a 6th grade meeting this morning, and 6th grade teachers were asking about restructuring for a week so that they could do a thematic unit and invite parents in to see some of those thematic presentations in an exhibition of learning. We have a master schedule that is built in such a way that teachers can manipulate that time. We tend to think about secondary education as these little instructional boxes inside a big box, because that's the way that many of our platforms force us to build schedules that way. What we need to do is figure out how we can manipulate those inside the box. Advisory is sacred to us. It is a really important time that we spend helping students craft their 8th grade defensive learning. And during that time, we help kids pick and choose the assignments and projects that they need to continue to work on. They get some feedback for that. Then they start to build towards what is going to be their defensive learning. You'll see the same work going on in 6th and 7th grade in preparation for a spring exhibition. And finally, one of the first strategic moves that we made in order to be able to unlearn the way we think about time is we turned off our bells at East Middle School. I no longer wanted a bell going off every 50 minutes, indicating to kids that this was the time that language arts stopped and that this was the time that we need to switch to science. That was one of the first strategic moves that we made. It threw everybody for a loop because everybody needed to unlearn the bell system. But that was one of the first moves that we made, was to kind of battle the lies that we tell ourselves about time. And that was in the beginning of our personalized learning secondary journey at East Middle. So our defenses were perfect from the get-go. That is a big no. We are still in the process of engaging in really what can be a perfect example of design thinking. Our defenses are in kind of perpetual prototyping and feedback loop. So the pluses that we see going on now, after we have now been doing defenses for 3 years, students have voice and choice in the pieces of evidence that they are going to defend at the end of the school year. They really engage in these projects because they have that voice and choice. We have more meaningful advisory periods. One of the drawbacks that I hear from principals across the state and country when I go to other conferences is that advisory can really quickly turn into just a study hall. And with the defense of learning being something that anchors the purpose in that period of time, we have more meaningful advising. Another thing that helps us have meaningful advising too is our district focus. You'll see that in the strategic leadership plan. Our district focus on social emotional learning is also a huge part of what we accomplish in our advisories. The most fun is to see those aha moments in those personalization projects when you see a kid who has decided to use the work that he's doing on his older brother's car in the garage as part of his defensive learning, and the student realizes that he has really a skill that no one else has. Those aha moments make all of the hard work worth it. Seeing kids use creativity in a way that you might not be able to see in a traditional assessment environment is exciting and renewing for teachers. Being able to see students in a different light. This is critical, a critical byproduct of our advisory and our defensive learning work. Students who might not shine in a traditional learning environment can shine when you give them the freedom to choose the things that they're going to share about themselves. And then finally, family and community engagement. We actually have had kids bring in their animals from their farm. We have one social media picture that was posted from West Middle School, our partners across town, where one girl brought in the cows that she takes care of each day, and the students had to go outside into the parking lot to watch her defense. I had a boy one time bring all kinds of cages of things. We had peacocks and rabbits and, all of the things that he was responsible for. Those kinds of conversations and seeing kids share part of themselves that's really just important to them and their daily lives is a really fun part of seeing students in a different light. Some of the drawbacks, of course, first of all, whenever you're moving towards shifting mindsets, which personalized learning often requires us to do, it does move at a glacial pace. I think we heard Susan say, sorry. All sixth grade testing. We heard Susan say that we've been in this work for 10 years and we are still in the feedback loop. So, and one thing that I want to especially offer to my principal colleagues is to remember that when you are starting into a shift like this, many teachers have to first unlearn what it is that they've practiced for years and years before they can be ready to learn and be competent in the new things. So make sure you're building time for teachers to unlearn what they've always done, because we all have to do that, whether it be, starting exercise or diet programs, right? We all have to go back and unlearn our bad habits before we can adopt new ones. We're still working on death by PowerPoint is what I call it. When we have our 8th grade defenses, it's really hard to sit through 220 PowerPoint presentations. We're trying to push students into the website and wiki site and Google site realm, so that they can be a little bit more creative than just PowerPoint presentation. And then finally, we are still working on accountability and responsibility with our students. It's one of those things where it's a careful dance. We don't want to kill creativity. We want kids to really engage in this and be excited about the work. But at the same time, we want it to be meaningful to them. One of the most recent ways through our L3 work that I think it's become super meaningful is now our community knows that we are doing these defenses of learning. And we actually had one community member who said, now that I know this is going on in the 12th grade classrooms, I'm going to start asking for kids to bring these to interviews. And so what a powerful shift that will be when we look at the accountability and responsibility of our 12th graders when they ask the inevitable question, why do I have to do this? So the future for our defenses of learning, and I can only speak for myself at the secondary level, especially at the middle school. We are working right now on how to develop a system that allows for better early defenders. Part of our competency-based core principles is move when ready. And I know I have 8th graders that are ready to defend their learning now in January. And yet our system has them waiting until April and May. So what I'd like to brainstorm and feedback I'd like to bring back to the group this summer is, how do we allow students to defend when they're ready and not have to wait until the end of the school year? Because that's us, I was talking about time as a barrier earlier. That's us setting up time as a barrier to our learning. And so we need to figure out how to do that differently. And the logistics, how does that look when defenses of learning are earlier than their grade level peers? What does that look like at the senior level? When, we want to be careful that we don't send the message that once you've defended, you're done, there's no more work to do. But at the same time, we do want to allow students to move when ready and go on to the next step if they are able to. So that's where we are. And then, of course, supporting a scale of our defenses of learning as we change them, as we better them. It's important to make sure that we're piloting that in a safe space with kids and teachers. Make sure that we're scaling it at just the right pace, not too fast to overwhelm, but also, not so slowly that people say, this will drop off eventually. And then, just having the support of our district. One of the key pieces to success for individual schools is to have the whole system from central office to preschool supporting what is going on with defenses of learning. And that is what you'll find in Shelby County.
Thank you, Jennifer. And as my first time talking for the group, my name is Adam Watts, and I'm the Digital Learning Coordinator for the district. And so fitfully enough, as a Digital Learning Coordinator, I'm going to talk a little bit about digital presences and tools. So my question is, and the thing I'll be talking about, is how can we collect the artifacts of learning that can make a really strong defense of learning at that moment of the event, but not forget that a defense of learning really is a process as well. It should not be something that we start thinking about 2 weeks before the day of, but something we should be thinking about throughout the school year, and for school years plural. So with that in mind, one of the things that we're leaning forward and exploring is the idea of how can we create a good place for that artifact collection to occur. And so one idea that we have we're pursuing and piloting is the idea of a district template of a Google site. And so as an example of that, going down to 5th grade, another transition year, we have a teacher, Matt Arledge, who has been exploring the idea of using Google Sites as a place for these students collect basically like a digital portfolio of their work and their reflections. And as I briefly go through an example of one, and I want to say that although I'm very impressed by this particular example, it's probably what would be considered average. There's a lot of incredible work out there as far as the baseline is pretty good. And this again is a 5th grade group of students. So just as an example, we'll walk through this example of a site. So this student has the first homepage, the About Me, listing some of their favorite things. They like the color blue, hamsters, baking. And on the bottom half of that same page, you can see how quickly this becomes a very rich and powerful digital portfolio and collection. You've got our profile of a graduate there, their school and their favorite subjects. The red arrow, though, I want to point out is their learning profile. And if you've done any level or shape, some kind of personalized learning plan or ILP, this is an example of what that could really look like as far as a real living document. So that opens up into a Google Doc where the student reflects on how they're doing on our profile of a graduate competencies, academic goals, and so on. So that is just one piece of this entire site, but just wanted to point that out as far as a part of this digital portfolio. Next, they have some artifacts. I wanted to highlight this one about making red velvet cupcakes, which is appropriate right after lunch. Have a little dessert here. What I love about this is that, first off, to Jennifer's point, there is a lot of Google slides and PowerPoints out there. But here's a 5th grader who's showing that, one of her examples that she's demonstrating is an actual book that she made. In addition to that is the idea that she's specifically highlighting one of our profile of a graduate competencies, which is an effective communicator, and why this particular book is a good example of it. Again, really rich, an example of here are 5th graders doing varied products and able to communicate and reflect on those. And the last page of this Google site will show as an example is the reflection page. How has she grown as a person, and how has she grown as a learner? I love the fact that she talks specifically about MAP. Here's my MAP scores. Here's where I'm going or want to go. That's intensely powerful. And as far as some of those core values that we have that are about competency-based education in Shelby County, think of all the things here, the agency, and the different ways that this student is showing empowerment in order to grow as a learner. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Mrs. Dougal.
All right, thank you. I'm so glad that Jennifer got to share today, first of all, because one of the great things about East Middle School was not only that I went there as a 6th, 7th, and 8th grader, I was a missile, but during this pandemic in the past few years, the first year, that March 2020, was the year we were supposed to start these defenses. And they had a choice on whether to go for it or not. And East Middle 8th grade teacher said, we're going to do it. So they did it by Zoom, and we learned so much from them. So when we talk about pilots, one of the cool things that we're able to do in Shelby County is we have the strategic leadership plan, but we give autonomy to leaders in the schools to do things and experiment with things and try things. And then those things inform the whole district work. Just like Adam shared, that Google site, that is informing something that we may do at the school level that kind of ties to what you see on the screen here. So the Shelby County Public School Local Laboratory of Learning, we are in the prototyping phase, working with our community. And where we think that's going to go this week is that we're going to build or help develop the defense, first of all, for the seniors, for our graduating seniors, to become a part of what they can take with them to job interviews in our community. We have a community college here, then they are also on our team, developing ways that they can use the artifacts and evidence that they're developing in school out in the real world after graduation and actually during their years in school when they want to have a job in the community and when they want to apply for leadership opportunities, those kinds of things. So that's what we're starting to develop now. And we're taking all of the learning that we have incurred over the last 5 years, and we're putting that together in a prototype. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And we'll be able to share that prototype in the coming days with a larger coalition the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education in Kentucky. We'll share that with that whole coalition next week, the idea. I just encourage all of you all to stay up to date on the work of those labs. We have another 8 districts joining in now. They're starting where we started back in September, and then another cohort coming on later. So we are building a larger coalition to advance a lot of the work that we all believe in, giving kids that choice and letting them show their unique talents and gifts and learning in different ways. So that's kind of where we are now. And we do have time for questions. So if anybody has any questions for any of the 3 of us, we would love to hear from that. Jennifer, anything you want to say about these resources?
Yes, only that I've created a SMORE newsletter there that has some research from the nation about defenses of learning, some resources from both local, state, and national resources that you can take a look at, and then just some stories from different places about the process of building a learning environment and a culture where defenses of learning are part of the creativity, not the product at the end. It's not the assessment. It's part of just like the picture before. It's a building of something wonderful, not a end of unit or end of year assessment. And some of our kids are really shining in that way. My youngest son is one of them. He is a sophomore at Shelby County High School, and may not be knocking it out of the park on the standardized tests, but when he builds his portfolio that he has done in his construction class, that is really where you'll see Sam Cox shine.
One of the other things that we have done in the past year, we revised our board policy, graduation policy, and a successful defense of learning is now a graduation requirement in Shelby County. So there are the minimal requirements that we are asked to do by the state, and then we have a few that we have added, and one of those is a successful defense. So the process of assessing the defenses at the end, we have rubrics and tools that we've developed over the years that do that, and students will defend, and oftentimes we'll get a not yet, and we'll get feedback, and we'll redefend again. So the process is a rigorous process, and they get better every year, and we get better every year. So we're really excited to see how that grows going forward. Any questions from the group? I think we have about 5 minutes. I think Mr. Watson has shared this PowerPoint Google slide in whatever platform we have. And when you go through each slide, he is the digital learning coordinator. You can click on multiple icons and find live links behind those. So if you have any questions about anything you saw today, quite possibly you can click on that picture or link, and it will take you a little deeper into some of that. But we would love to hear from you, and you can email me if you'd like to, and I can connect you to all different levels, lots of different schools, and you can find out more about what's going on with our defenses of learning.
Excuse me. Thank you, guys. I had a question as the host here, and maybe you can speak to it, Jennifer, since you're in that transitional time for sure. But do you guys see, or is there an initiative to, like when those 8th graders do their defenses of learning, for the high schools or the freshman teachers to see that, experience that, or do you go down and watch the 5th grade as like a way to start learning about those kids, or what does that connection look like?
I think, Chase, you hit perfectly on where we need to go next. Now that we have been able to experiment with what it means within the school building, now we need to, just like our PowerPoint says, Adam named it perfectly, we need to transition the transition. So that is part of our next step. And you're right, that is a logical next step. What does it mean for our 9th grade teachers to get a glimpse or get to know our 8th graders? And when you think about relationship building and really knowing students, what a powerful tool that can be for us as 5th graders are introducing themselves to us at such a pivotal time. And for the 9th graders, our 8th graders going up to 9th grade can be just as anxious as our 5th graders entering middle school. And for them to know that someone has really looked deeply at this artifact and can speak to them about it the first time they walk into their advisory room, that's what I'd love to be able to see as a next step.
And I'll add to that. I think that whether it's the Google site or some other, tool that we may use, what a beautiful thing that a 5th grader coming into East Middle School, Jennifer is an advisor and can look at that student and say, hamsters, the color blue, love to bake. That's 3 things I knew about you even before the first day of school, thanks to your site or the tool. And if you're capable of doing this kind of product, thanks to the artifacts I saw in 5th grade, I'm going to raise the bar, for this particular student. I know what I can do and what I can go as the next step. And that's the continuum all the way through and afterwards, right? The idea of the 8th grader going, from East Middle School to the high school, look at this body of work. They've done some good work, and we're going to keep that rolling. We can raise those expectations or keep the expectations high based on knowing the student and knowing what they've done and where they need to go next based on some of their own expressed goals and things that, hey, this is what I was working on or I'm working on now.
Oops. Thank you guys for that conversation. If you're on this call and you've not seen much of what Shelby County Schools does, I would encourage you to look into that work. There's a lot of powerful work that's happened in Shelby County, not just now, but it's been going on for a while. And I think there's a lot for places and people to learn. And I've always, I really appreciate this idea of there seems to be a really nice balance of district vision and collaborations and conversations across districts, but also following Jennifer on social media and some other things, like being able to develop a school identity as well. And so I think that's a testament to the work you guys do. And thank you guys for leading us today. So we've got about 10 minutes before the next transition. So I think we got 1 or 2 more sessions today, but thank you guys, and appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.